Welcome to the Inner Athlete Podcast, where we help young athletes, parents, and coaches build strong, resilient, and high-performing athletes for sport and life. I'm Trent Peter He, head strength conditioning coach and founder of Inner Athlete. Each episode, we break down the training, mindset, and habits that actually matter, from strength and speed development to injury prevention, confidence, and long-term athletic growth. Whether you're a parent trying to support your child or an athlete chasing their potential, you're in the right place. Let's get into today's episode.
Yeah, because you have a high strength base, and that's another topic for another day. I'll use Karina for an example. She came off, she had surgery, she had a syndesmosis tear in the lower shank, and now she played just gone 2 90-minute games 4 days apart. So she was clocking up like between 98 to 101 meters per minute, which is actually quite high. And the way that she looked, she was very bouncy. Like it just looked like it was like more effortless moving on the pitch. Anytime for any athlete that I see, especially with the girls' side, I notice that they have a strength training background is how bouncy they are, or how quick do they adapt to skills that are more running technique work. Can they have the limited contact time with the ground? We know research says the shorter the amount of time you have on the ground, the faster the athlete's likely to be. We know that specifically from like when we do like the double leg triple hops. Right? Those who spend very limited time on the ground, we know they're producing a large amount of force. So their impulse is actually quite high.
Yeah.
Right. That in itself can actually transfer to other skills. So there's a skill. I was talking to you and one of our football boys last program. We changed his ability to mark the ball, set himself back, and then feed the ball off, like kick the ball to a teammate. What I said is I just want you to just sit when you backpedal, just sit a little bit lower. And how we do the tall kneeling takeoffs and do that to kick the ball or get yourself moving forward and then kick the ball. He found that it was more punch with the kick and it was traveling, like it looked visually faster. I didn't give him the cue to do it beforehand. I said, just do it normal way and then do it the way that I said. He punched the ball off faster and like what felt quicker to get out of the hands? The second one. So getting stronger and creating that bounce and stiffness is the thing that will enable players not just develop running ability, but really more specific skills on that side. Another example I have would be with Gigi, her contact. So when I first started working with Gigi, she contact, obviously not her strongest suit, right? And then obviously having a season of work with her. She went to futsal early this year, nationals up in Queensland. She said found contact was so much easier. Yeah. And this is for someone who's a very undersized player.
Yeah.
Relative to the rest of the league, playing, she's 18 playing senior women's football. You could play women that are 30 odd. And generally she's on the smaller end. She's probably like the bottom 25% in terms of build, but she can hold her ground. That's the key thing. It's not her to smash anyone on the field. It's not the type of player that she is, but it's more, can she take the contact, create that pressure? So now you start to open up more of a skill set by just getting them stronger. And obviously my background doing more contact work with the soccer girls and has enabled her to have more confidence in getting stronger and combining those two moving forward. That's probably what I've noticed is from that perspective. And then the other part is if you're looking from a kicking perspective, one thing I notice is a lot of athletes will try and like guide their leg through. And when it comes to kicking, so whether it's like punting, a drop punt, off the ground, goal kick, whatever it may be, you actually want to treat the foot as more of a whip or the leg as a whip. So it's more like transferring that kinetic energy. A lot of players try to guide it, and that's where they kind of start to mishit it. So it's more that helping, allowing that transfer of energy, and then you're just making sure, obviously you practice through reps and reps and reps of getting the timing to strike the ball at the right point. And I think that's kind of like what strength training can start to do, is help to create that control in order to treat the leg more as a whip. But I think that will come down to doing more plyometric work than anything else. I wouldn't say strength training alone. Plyometrics is actually is better. So javelin throwers actually do kick the soccer ball in order to improve their throws. Because what happens when you kick a ball, you use so if I'm right-footed kicking the ball, I use my left leg as the block leg.
Yeah, like plant.
It's plant leg, and it's teaching you to transfer the energy and the ground reaction forces from the time you make contact with the ground. You don't want to be re-bending the knee. Some athletes will kind of like, they'll create the block, and they'll bend the knee down, and they'll straighten the knee up. So you really want to create a stiffness in the leg to allow that energy to transfer down into the leg, and then the body turns in through, the body starts to turn the leg through and create that and help with the transfer effect. So strength training can actually help to improve the ability to deal with these ground reaction forces that we're contending with. If you want to kick it 40, 50 meters, especially for females, we need to improve the lower limb strength, and then also the ability to tolerate high forces in a very short window of time.
Yeah.
So those ground contact forces.
And it just kind of comes back to, power. How quickly can you produce your strength? You still need to have a solid baseline of strength to be able to produce it, to be able to produce it quickly. And just like the speed is one thing that you want to try and work on once you, have a strong base of strength.
Correct. Yeah. It's how fast can you express that strength?
Exactly.
It's a really big one. I want to. No, we'll move on. This is gone for. It's been good timing. We talked about number 6. I think probably the biggest lessons. I think probably wrap it up. That'll be the key.
Just like practical takeaways.
Yeah, practical takeaways. So if we're talking about lessons of practical takeaways, so you've listened to the first couple of episodes on how strength training is, I guess, a big factor in terms of getting someone strong. But it's like, what do you do? It's like, do you go all in on strength, or do you go all in on more that just the sport itself? And it's like, well, at the end of the day, it's a combination of where the problem lies with the athlete. So for us as strength and conditioning coaches, we're always understanding what is the actual inherited problem with, well, I wouldn't say problem, but where's the gap or gaps with the athlete. So that's why it's always important to understand what the schedule is for the athlete, what they actually have been focusing on for the last 6 to 12 months, what's their training age, or I guess, or lack of training experience, how old they are, where they are in terms of their physiological maturation. So are they still preteen, going through puberty, end of puberty? So there's physiological changes that are occurring at different stages, and then we want to be quite mindful of what's happening at those stages specifically. So if someone starts puberty and has this massive growth spurt, we always tend to see there tends to be a regression in terms of the way they move. It's almost like it's a new body they're moving into.
Yeah, it's especially apparent for females, right? And then when they're got to kind of relearn how to run.
Yeah, their hip structure completely changes, and there's not going to say completely changes, but there's alterations that occur. So it's more anterior tilted. We have an opening of the pelvis, and that actually changes the way the muscles will actually fire and coordinate. So that's where strength training can kind of come early in, more speeding up that cycle, and getting through those phases a lot faster.
Yeah, just being able to help them understand, why this has all changed.
Yeah.
I think one thing as well to add is injury history as well.
Yes.
That's obviously, something a pretty big factor.
Yeah, injury history can actually lead to like a lot of like patterns and compensations. So we know, I think I didn't mention this in the intro, the first intro. Jack, has done the activation course, and we know, speaking to Corel and people who have done activations in the past, it's like your injury history is obviously a big component, but like what's the compensatory factors at play? It's like, how do you create powerful force or, strength within the system or resiliency in the system? And there's so many cheat codes. If you look at like the hyperarch fascial guy from New York, he talks about the 22 kilos of fascia, blah, 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 blah. I think I memorized the whole thing. He's on Instagram. Anyways, have you seen it?
No, is it not functional patterns?
It's not functional patterns. It's like another guy.
I go way too far.
Anyways, he's worked. Look, he's worked with a few UFC fighters, and he's worked with a couple of soccer players. And I'm like, his stuff is like, it makes sense in terms of what he's talking about. But he's saying, like, it's just a system. He's just understanding some underlying principles, but I still think it's still missing some various components as well. So, anyways, the point that I was talking about is he's put up video footage of athletes doing these weird ticks, and these weird ticks is like there's an old soccer player, and like his touch is unbelievable, but you watch him and he kind of like tense his wrist, and then he puts his foot up, and then he kind of just like his touch is unbelievable. He gets the ball to stop his foot. So he's creating it's a compensatory pattern or a cheat pattern to actually be able for him to do that task specifically. Something he's developed over a long period of time. Now, look, it works. Athletes have cheat patterns all the time. The problem is, though, what happens if that doesn't work? And then I've got a quick story of when I was in the activation course. One of the practitioners there, he was a junior All Black. I think I might have told you this story, actually. Maybe. Anyways.
If you're getting value from the Inner Athlete podcast, make sure you like, subscribe, and leave a review. It helps more parents and young athletes find the right guidance and keeps this podcast growing. Back to the show.
So he was I think it was either a winger or a fullback. So anytime he would take a high ball, he'd always take it on the chest, right? Go one leg up. You know, you always have one leg up to guard yourself from someone running in, from taking your legs out in that sense, or, you know, protecting your organs. And it actually increases your time in the air as well. So you actually land in a lower position, so you're not open up to getting smashed in the sternum as such. Anyways, he took the ball. He always take the ball like this. And there was one time in a game he took an overhead position, and then there was no contact or anything like that. But this was the one time that the only time he took it overhead, he actually tore his ACL just from the land. So it was a non-contact injury, right? His cheat pattern, or in that sense, is like for him to stabilize his lower body, he had to kind of like tense up his upper body in order to do that, or have his arms down in this position in order to help him brace, which helped him brace, and then he'd be able to land just fine. This one time took it overhead, boom. And that kind of like led down the pattern. It's like, why do we see athletes do the same problem or have the same problem? You know, we look at Lindsey Vonn. She's an American downhill skier. She's torn an ACL, I don't know how many times now, some ridiculous amount. Now she's coming back from into in terms of competing. I think she's competing in the next Winter Olympics, which is next month actually, in Italy. And to me, it was quite interesting to understand that a lot of athletes do have these cheat patterns in order to help them compensate and do certain movement patterns in such a way that you can actually take these patterns away from them specifically. If you know someone's pattern well enough by just reading them and how they behave, because, you know, athletes, you can read them essentially. You take it away, and then you can actually, you know, beat them at their own game. So that's why boxers have certain strategies, find where the gaps are, the flaws, and exploit that moving forward. For me, identifying that is probably the key part of helping athletes moving forward. It's like, what are the strategies? And soccer players are no different. They have the same, very similar strategies that allows them to do their tasks, but does allow them to do their tasks to a higher standard to continue to develop? Potentially, but you have that underlying pattern there all the time as well. And sometimes you do need to gradually break them down in the sense of to become more efficient. So say, for example, like I use Karina as an example. Like her running gait has actually changed a little bit more, where she's actually a lot, like I said, she's a lot more bouncy. So she's actually a lot more fluid in the way that she moves. And that's the way that we want athletes to actually move, is to move in more of a fluid sense, but to be able to generate strength and power at the right time.
Yeah.
Not all the time, because obviously you'll get gassed. The other part is like strength is, I think the biggest key takeaway is like strength is just like a pillar. It's like a base. It's just like, it just lays the foundations for everything else to actually be stacked on.
Yeah.
So, do athletes need to be doing, lifting heavy weights as such? Like, no, it's not necessarily the goal as such. It's more of a means to an end to help fill in those gaps specifically for them. And then movement quality for us is obviously a big thing, and that's where strength training can really come into play, is making sure that they can continually move in a way that we want them to. Because the other part that we didn't mention is sometimes if someone doesn't learn how to run properly, or the sport teaches them how to run, they develop bad movement patterns. Strength training can actually help to break out those movement patterns, because we get to load up, hold those positions, and the brain can actually start to recognize those positions specifically, and they'll start to see subtleties in the way that they move as well. And I think the other part is reassessments as well. So we reassess our athletes every 6 to 8 weeks in terms of the fitness testing to actually see where they're progressing. And pretty much on a weekly basis, we're actually asking how they're performing.
Yeah, touching base with them.
Yeah.
I think, to add to that, it's also making sure that their goals are still relevant. Like, has the needle shifted? Do they want to work on something else? Is there something that they've identified in their training or their coach has brought up that they now need to work on? And yeah, obviously, this is kind of like a no-brainer, but I feel like a pretty practical takeaway is like the speed and coordination must be trained intentionally as well as the strength. Like, you can't just, half-ass your speed work. It's like you get out what you put in, right? You're not going 100% in the gym with your lifts. You're not going 100% on the track. You're not going to get as much out of it as you should. And then, if you're not putting yourself what you're actually going to then experience in a game, that's, when that likelihood of injury can increase, because you're, putting yourself in a movement pattern that your body's not used to, especially if you try and repeat it.
Yeah. And I guess you got to look at training. Training is more the preparation for you to be able to play. So sometimes movement patterns do need to somewhat look like what you're training, or what you're competing or you're doing in the game specifically, in order to make you more physically prepared for that as well. But there's a time and place where we need to actually take that away.
Yeah, I think there's still a time and place where you need to focus on the movement quality, whereas the quality can be, I guess, broken down and shifted in a sport. Whereas in the strength and conditioning setting, we can really kind of focus on that movement quality and trying to get that technically sound.
Yeah, and it might be an athlete that struggles with change of direction. Why is that? Okay, we assess the ankles. Okay, now we know there's some sort of restriction. Maybe they've, in the way they cut, they end up doing more of like a pivot rather than, a couple of steps in order to change that direction, or they just struggle to reorientate that body. And that's where the strength and conditioning side of, teaching more like those running drills, breaking them down, the change of direction drills, in order to allow them to feel the positions that we want them to, get them to rehearse that more in their situation or scenario without making them more of a closed skill, without too much pressure, or with no pressure, get them to feel, and then get them to implement it under a little bit of pressure. And it's like, and then they actually feel different. So it actually feels a lot more fluid, because you'll find a lot of athletes, they just, with those types of movements, they kind of they really struggle on feeling where their body is in space.
Yeah, definitely, especially the younger ones as well. They just haven't really got that, I guess, that neuromuscular connection yet, right?
No, and the body awareness is proprioception, if you want.
Yeah, exactly. It's just not there yet.
No, cool. Jack, unreal. It's been good to yak for an hour.
That's good.
Yeah, but he went quick. So if you're really interested in actually coming down, actually training with us as well, we'll leave our contact details below. We do have like a paid trial, or quick start paid trial. Come down, see what we're all about. You might get Jack or myself or Alex, or potentially another coach moving forward, depending on when this podcast is released as well, to really assess what your child's needs are. And strength training is a means to an end, but you need to contextualize it to make sure it's addressing the needs of who we're actually talking to, and who actually needs that support to fill in those gaps specifically as well. Until then, I'll see you on the next one.
You have just listened to the Inner Athlete podcast. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date with the release of weekly episodes. Be sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram to get great tips on all things youth athlete development and youth mentoring.